Hello again, YouTubers. Hello, patrons. Today's topic of this video is 5 things that you may be practicing incorrectly and how to correct them. And before I go on, please make sure to subscribe. After the video is over, please comment. Press that notification button so you always get notified of my upcoming videos. So let's get into it. The first thing on my list I'd like to put up, the first 5 things that you may be practicing incorrectly is first overtones and long tones. Now that's 2 different things, but I kind of like to put them together because they both contain within them some of the same problems. Now I'll start off with long tones. Now oftentimes people are just playing there's different types of long tone exercises you could do, but the main thing is not only do you play them for a longer extended time, relatively slow, you have to listen intently to what you're doing. And another thing is you have to work on hearing the tone before you play it. For instance, if I was going to play just for some long tones, I discussed in another video. If you see one of my other videos on long tones, there's also a download to a PDF that you have octaves and fourths intervals and octave and fifth intervals in there. Now, I put a link here in this video so you can get to that. Video, check that out. But the main thing here, like I said, those long tone exercises are toward fine-tuning your ears to hear octaves and perfect fourths and octaves and perfect fifth intervals. Excuse me. And so you want to be able to hear the next tone that you're going to play before you actually play it. And another thing on top of that, you would want to practice your long tones with various dynamics, going from softer, crescendo to a forte back to piano, or actually just swelling, or for sando you could do like things like this. Vary the type of dynamics you're going to use when you're practicing. These all are things that belong to your performance skills, and you want to keep sharp on all of them. And also just find out, what parts of your horn, how do they respond to those type of using those dynamics. You'll notice that in lower notes is going to be, of course, as we all know, a little difficult to play piano, but you want to try it. You want to go for as much as you can, that you get more of the tone and not so much air. Same thing for the highest notes. You'll be able to get them at pianissimo, but it all depends on your saxophone setup. All depends on your reed and your mouthpiece and things like that. Can you really play it at pianissimo at a very high notes? Overtones. Overtones I also mentioned in the other video, and the thing is here too, and also my embouchure video, a link to that here. I mentioned one of the problems of practicing overtones is that a lot of people do it, I say, incorrectly, from the bottom up. They start by playing low B flat and they go up, the partials, and call that practicing overtones. And I'm saying, yeah, that's one way to do it, but we are trying to develop an embouchure that's going to be responsive, that's going to be looser, not too tight. Having a tight embouchure is not going to do you any favors. But to practice your overtones from the bottom up is you're doing exactly what you don't want. You're making your embouchure tight because you usually, intentively, you wind up tightening your embouchure in order to reach the other overtone partials. I'll be providing an exercise, where to show you how I do the overtone exercises, and I like to do them from the top down. I don't start at the very top. I start at the first partial and let it fall to the low one. You'll see that in the in the PDF I provided on the one note theory for embouchure. Check out that video and make sure to download that document. And I start off the partial and I always let it fall. See, this forces me, first I tighten up the embouchure a little bit, but I'm always looking toward relaxing it and bringing the tones back down to the fundamental tone, back down to my first tone. And so that's how I like to practice the overtones, and then I still get the benefit of having all the overtone exercise, and plus being able to hear the tone that you're going for before you play it. All these things, they all play a role. They all have to be done together. Number 2, technique. There's certain technical exercises. Well, there's tons of technical exercises one could do. And I'm not going to tell you any specific things to do, specific exercises to do, but one thing that is important to look for is that, for instance, conventional wisdom has always told us we start at a very slow tempo and periodically increase the tempo. I'd like to tell you that is the most inefficient way to get things done. First of all, now there is something to be said starting at slower tempos and also to bring up the tempo. But the thing is, I think you could do that even more effectively. That not only do you play at a slower tempo, but also that you use rhythmical variations. That means that if I have a series of eighth notes, like for instance, I just play a segment, like for instance, if I was just going to practice that, just in 5 notes. Now I could use the first rhythmical variation, easy enough, Then I take that rhythm and I turn it on its head. Do that at least 3 times, And then I change up the rhythm, like say, if it's a quarter and a triplet. Then I'll turn that around. Then I'll do a quarter, 2 triplets, and a quarter. Then I'll do a triplet, quarter, quarter, triplet. Now I still have here the same 5 notes, and I've played them, if I just repeated them all 3 times, just 3 times, and I've played this exercise, just these 5 notes, in 7 different variations, including the original. And if I repeated them 3 times, then I would have played these 5 notes 21 times already, And the main point of doing this way, I've been able to repeat these 5 notes. I can strengthen my technique by varying the speed between playing these notes, and most importantly, I'm doing it without getting bored to death by playing the same rhythm each and every time if I was going to do it 21 times. The main thing, the thing to remember is that in order for us to learn things, we have to not only, first of all, we have to give material to our brain piecemeal, just little by little, and without much stress. But also, on top of that, we have to make things interesting for our brains in order to keep the information, in order to memorize it. Rhythmical variations is a way to do that, because this way, to the melody that we're playing, these 5 notes, it sounds different in every rhythmical variation. Now, depending on what you're playing, depending on what these 5 notes is, this could be used for any passages, for any scale exercises, for any segment out of a piece you're learning, or a jazz lick that you're learning. You could change it up this way. And what it does, it sounds different every time. And then in some rhythms, it won't be that easy to play. But when that happens, be glad, because this is where you could actually learn something. You could learn it actually deeper this way. third thing I would like to talk about is metronome use. Now, of course, it's good to use a metronome. A lot of people hate using metronomes, but the thing is, because they use it in the most boring way possible. They play on the metronome, they'll play like 16 notes, for instance, and they'll just have on every single beat, 1, 2, 3, 4. Fine and good, keep it that way, but make it more interesting. Keep playing the 16 notes, like say if you were doing it at 120, but let your metronome really just beat at 60. So then you're forced just to play, only hear the clicks on 1 and 3. And then you'll see if you have correct timing between the 16th notes, between the beats, between the clicks. You'll notice probably at first you'll be rushing, and then, or you might be too slow. But in any case, at first your timing won't be perfect. Another way you could use it is have the metronome going. Have the metronome, like for instance, here, I'll just take out my handy metronome here. Yeah. Like this, it's a little bit, crazy. But if I was going to hear going, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, I could do this way. 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1. And this mimics basically my a jazz hi-hat, and I could wind up playing jazz phrases on that way, using the metronome this way, It's another way to improve your timing. What you could also use is, like say if a metronome is just too old school for you, what you could also use is a drum machine or any type of rhythm machine, which you actually have, you hear a different drum beat, and play all your exercises to that, And then it keeps it interesting, makes things sound a little bit differently. It'll even get you to maybe articulate differently than you may not ever do if you're using just a metronome. So that's something that you may want to experiment with. 4, practicing jazz patterns. Now, practicing jazz patterns is a good thing. It's a good thing to get into. The first one, you expand your own technique, and while you're doing it, the danger in it is that, first of all, oftentimes we wind up just reading the notes, but not really memorizing it, or not really concentrating on it in cooperation or in cooperation with the chord itself. We oftentimes see the notes, but we totally ignore the chord, what it actually belongs to. That's not actually the purpose what we should be doing. Best thing would be is to take one lick, try to memorize it as quickly as possible, and also transpose it, over different chords. Different chords on the chord it was intended for, and see if it works on other chords as well. Sit down at the piano, play this lick, or if you have any type of app where you can form an accompaniment, make one with that chord and see if that lick fits. If the lick doesn't fit, change the notes to make it fit for that chord. Now, the thing is, when we're practicing patterns, we want to get the most bang for our buck, so to say. We want to get as much use out of it as possible. So that means I'm taking, not only paying attention to chords, but I'm also taking the lines that I'm learning and I'm transforming them in order to fit other places. Now, and on top of that, what I want to do is, once I've done all this too, I'm doing a lot of input, but I want to spend most of my time on output, This is also another, I'd say, mistake of many people practicing. They'll practice tons of jazz patterns, and they wonder why it almost never comes out in their solos, because they're concentrating too much on input and not enough on output, not enough on actually using the material. You have to purposely use licks in solos with your play-alongs in order to get them out spontaneously. Just by taking in a lot of input and it's not going to make it magically happen. I'd say I like to compare this with language learning. I think most of us have taken a foreign language at school for maybe 2-3 years, but we still can't speak the language. mainly because we concentrated all on input, learning the language, learning grammar and things like that, but not enough on actually how the language is used in daily life, And that's what actually gets you efficient. And here, with practicing jazz patterns and things like that, is exactly what happens there. Too much input, not enough output. And my fifth thing I'd like to talk about is the use of transcriptions. Now, whether you transcribe solos yourself or you read transcriptions, either way, they're both good. If you do transcriptions yourself, fine and good, especially I can imagine if you're still studying music in college and you must really kick butt, in solfege class and in hearing in ear training class. But in any case, transcriptions, whether you're reading them or whether you're doing them yourselves, either way is good. But when you do it, learn the changes of the tune first. Learn them. Learn them by heart. That you really know the changes. And if you have, if you're reading a transcription that doesn't have the chord changes above them, find out what the changes are and really put them in there, because all reading the transcription without the chords will be of no help for you whatsoever if you don't know the changes. You won't, you look at the line, you'll think it's great, you'll play it and stuff like that, but you won't know where it's used and how it's used. It's very important to keep that in mind. And again, here, to get the most bang out of your for your buck out of transcriptions is transform those lines that you're learning. Learn to use them in your solos and learn to see where else could be done, not only in that tune that you're learning it in, but use them, try to find out if it fits in a totally different tune, with a totally different tempo. Also a totally different time signature. See if that, see how that works. And, last but not least on that topic, what I probably should have mentioned first is listen to the original recordings. I know of too many jazz students who get their hand on the Charlie Parker Omnibook, for instance, and they learn the solos in the Omnibook, but they've never bothered to listen to the original recordings where Charlie Parker were playing the solos himself. It makes a big difference. And also, even then, when you're playing these transcriptions, play them in various tempos. It does change the way you will articulate the lines. This is important. This only helps with your musical growth. So anyway, those are my 5 tips on the things that you could be practicing incorrectly and how you can correct them. So if you like this video, give it a thumbs up, give it a like, comment, subscribe, and press that notification button. And in order for me to keep doing these videos, maybe you consider becoming a patron. In the description at the bottom will be a link to my Patreon page, and there I'll be providing even more content on that page, not only from YouTube videos, but also downloads really from Improv A2s and the such, things that won't be available here on YouTube. But in any case, thanks again for joining me, and I hope to see you the next time in the next video.